Some observers of human behavior will say that our first instinct as human beings, as people, is to compare and to compete. Who is the tallest? Who's the strongest? Who's the smartest? Who's the best looking? It is almost instinctive that we measure and we compare. Am I greater than you or am I less than you? How are you better than me? How am I better than you? How do I feel less than you? And sometimes we work really hard to be the best, right? Others give up trying and they're just resigned to living a life where they are less than. The teacher in Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament actually had something to say about this. The teacher observed, all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. Ecclesiastes 4:4. Hear that again. All toil, all work, all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. Well, that may be painting in a broad brush, as we might say, but seems probably there's a lot of truth to that too. In our culture, here in North America, in Western culture, we like to believe, and we talk about oftentimes, how our achievements, whatever I achieve in life, it's because of my hard work, because of my intelligence. And think about how we celebrate those who are wealthy. Those who are wealthy we look up to. For some reason, we think those who are billionaires, if they say something about something, that we need to listen to them. Because why? Because they've got their PhD and no, because they're billionaires. And so we celebrate the wealthy. We celebrate powerful winners. Think about sports. And we blame the less fortunate losers, oftentimes for any problems that we see around us. But comparing ourselves to others isn't a healthy way to build your sense of identity, to build your sense of worth. Because no matter what you achieve, no matter what I achieve, there's always going to be someone who bumps you out of the ranking. You're going to meet someone who's smarter than you, who's achieved more, who has earned more, has been more successful. Always somebody who bumps me out of the ranking. Most sports records are eventually broken, and athletes strive hard to break those records, to make that achievement. Accomplishments are surpassed or forgotten. Beauty and fame kind of fade over time, right? So can we find a better way? Can we sit out of this game of competition and comparison? Can we somehow achieve self-respect that is not dependent upon winning, that's not dependent upon being better than somebody else? And if so, what would that look like? In the teaching that's called the Sermon on the Mount, teaching on the hill in Matthew 5, in the third beatitude, as we count them, Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Many, many people, when they hear the word meekness, they hear the rhyming word weakness. Meekness equals weakness. And so for many of us, this third beatitude comes across as almost laughable. And it's even more laughable when Jesus says that the meek are set for world domination. But let's think about this word. Let's try to probe a little bit more what Jesus is getting at when he uses a word that Maybe we don't hear that often in our day and age. A few chapters after pronouncing this blessing on the meek, Jesus says these words, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." Now, behind that English word gentle in modern translations is the same Greek word that is translated meek in the beatitude that we are considering this morning. Matter of fact, older translations, if you have the King James or an older translation, it actually quotes Jesus as saying, or it renders Jesus' words, "For I am meek and lowly in heart." And then, on the Sunday before his death, Jesus sits on a young donkey and he makes his entry into Jerusalem. And he's fulfilling an ancient prophecy that dates back to Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. And Zechariah 9:9, and this is quoted in Matthew 21, verse 5, "See, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Again, here behind the word gentle in Matthew's quotation of Zechariah's prophecy is that Greek word that's translated meek in the Beatitude in Matthew 5:5. And again, the King James actually has this translated as meek and riding on a donkey. So here we have a king who is described as meek and riding on a donkey. Here Jesus says that he is meek and humble in heart. So maybe we need to look to Jesus before we listen to what the world around us says about meekness. And maybe these references suggest that meek in our beatitude may not mean what we often think that it means. Kind of weak, kind of become a human doormat. Dictionary of Biblical Imagery says this: in classic Greek, the word from which we get meekness was used to describe taming animals. The word also implies self-control. Aristotle, Greek philosopher, describes this word, the Greek word, as the mean, the middle point between excessive anger and excessive passivity, so that meekness can be regarded as strength under control. And I've heard this illustration used for meekness. Think of a horse, the bridle on a horse. A horse in a bridle is strength under control. Strength under control. That's possible when you know your inherent worth. That's possible when you know who you are and you have a healthy image of your worth. The meek person can be at ease. The meek person doesn't have to strive or compete or feel inferior to anyone. Another person's rank, another person's achievements or status or smarts doesn't lessen your value or your esteem. Because the testimony of Scripture is that the deepest and truest thing about me and you is that we are made in the image of God. And because of that, you have inherent dignity and worth. You have value that is not dependent upon your achievements. You have value that doesn't need to be validated by anyone else. And it has been bestowed upon you, it has been given to you by the Creator of the universe. That's why you can be meek, because you know who you are. And what matters more than anything else is the value that you have in the eyes of your Creator. And so this prompted the ancient psalmist to write the words that you see on the screen there to God. He says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. So meekness doesn't mean that I have to always be comparing myself. And if I struggle to affirm my dignity, my true dignity, my genuine worth, then maybe, and I pass this on, maybe we might want to just every day take a moment. Maybe tape this on your mirror in the morning, Psalm 139:14. Maybe pause several times a day to speak these words aloud. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. I'm not talking about getting a swelled head here. I'm not talking about pride, okay? I'm talking about meekness. Meekness gives you the accurate assessment of who you are. And it gives you an assessment of all others who are also created in the image of God. On the night before his execution on the cross, Jesus celebrated what would be his final, last Passover with the disciples, his followers. And in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, it's recorded that during that final Passover celebration, Jesus got up and he washed the feet of the disciples. And the disciples, they were incensed. They were annoyed because washing feet was the job of the household servant. The household servant was the one, the household slave was the one who would wash the feet of guests when they arrived. The feet would be dusty and dirty from the sandals of the day. And so washing of the feet was the humblest chore, and certainly not appropriate for a rabbi, a teacher like Jesus. But Jesus washing the feet of the disciples is an incredible example of meekness. How could Jesus do that? Why could Jesus? Because Jesus knew who he was. And it didn't matter for him to sit down, to get down and wash the feet of the disciples to teach them a lesson about who they were. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to die as a ransom for many. But this story also reveals something about the disciples, something which is probably true of us sometimes, that we can get stuck in rigid, false, hierarchical thinking. And we can place people in certain positions up or down our scale, our ladders. And the disciples resisted having Jesus wash their feet because they divided the world into those who were greater than them and those who were lesser than them. I think we're still doing it. I think when you come into a room and you look around, say, oh, there's some who are greater than me, some who are lesser than me. But Jesus knew his own worth. He knew his own dignity. And he washed the feet of his disciples, his followers, because he knew their equal dignity and worth. They were created in the image of God. And so in the life of Jesus, we see this flexibility that comes from a correct understanding of his worth. And so Jesus pours his life out for others. But at the same time that he's pouring his life out for others, he lets others care for him. He asks for help. He asks for a drink of water from a woman that his own culture despised. How can he? Because he's meek. He's strong in his own identity. He depends on friends for funds, for food, for shelter as he travels. And he also lets others wash his feet, by the way. A woman, Luke chapter 7, comes in, bathes his feet. On the road to Jerusalem, where Jesus is heading, knowing that the cross is the end of the road there, his disciples are arguing. They're debating among themselves, which one of us is the greatest? Because we divide our world into the greater than and the lesser than. So which one of us is the greater? And Jesus overhears this. You remember his words. The greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. And I am among you as one who serves. That's meekness. After Jesus washed the feet of the disciples, he said, "You also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Have you ever experienced a foot washing service? Anyone? Good. Okay. I know in some Mennonite churches that's not infrequent, as I been reading this week. Okay, on the Thursday before Good Friday, Catholic churches will have what they call a Maundy Thursday service. Maundy, if I'm pronouncing it right, is from a Latin word meaning command, reflecting these words right here. And it's a dramatic reenactment of Jesus' command where they will have foot washing. Anglican churches, Lutherans, Mennonites, as I mentioned, and other churches also practice this. I have never had somebody else wash my feet as an adult. Never been to a foot washing service. And apparently, there was this ad that premiered during a football game in Las Vegas last Sunday.
Don't ask me what you know is true. Don't have to tell you I love your precious heart. I was standing, you were there, two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. We can live
Apparently, this ad has upset everybody. As I was I came across a reference to this ad and watched it, and afterwards I read about the controversy. Probably good that it was afterwards I read about the controversy, but as you know how the media, people on the left, people on the right, everybody has their reasons for being upset about it. But let's think about this. I think foot washing requires humility, meekness on the part of both parties. To be willing to wash somebody else's feet, to bend down, to get down and to do that, you've got to have a pretty good sense of your own self-worth. And also, if you're the one who's having your feet washed, you may have to, as we say, swallow a bit of your pride. Foot washing requires both sides, I think, both parties, so to speak, to lower themselves. And while that posture seems meek at first, it also represents an act of kindness and generosity on the part of the foot washer. Now, most of us no longer walk dusty roads in sandals in the 21st century. And so the ad invites us to think about equivalents today to washing another's feet. How would our world change if we washed one another's feet, not literally necessarily, but figuratively? And don't forget that among the feet that Jesus washed on that Thursday night before his death would be whose? Judas's, the one who would betray him. He washed the feet of Judas Iscariot. How do you demonstrate meekness? Maybe by washing the feet of Judas. Maybe by washing the feet of Judas, Jesus is telling us it's by overtly loving and serving those with whom you have profound disagreements and differences. Maybe that's how you wash the feet of somebody else. Imagine if we chose to use our strength, our worth, to serve, to wash the dirt from each other's feet. Blessed are the meek. The Beatitudes invite us, I think, and this Beatitude invites us to move from competition and comparison to true worth. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. To stop that striving, to see our true selves, to understand who you are, created in the image of God, and everyone that you meet, everyone you interact with has also been and is also created in God's image. And so we honor the dignity of everyone, and we walk in the way of meekness. Machiavelli, Niccolò Machiavelli, Renaissance era philosopher. Some of you may be familiar with him. He was a politician, writer. His writings really continue to influence politics today, interestingly. Machiavelli believed that to be effective, leaders needed to be ruthless, tyrannical. There was no place for empathy in leadership. There was no need for justice as a leader. And he wrote a book, which is on the screen there, called The Prince. And it's a short manual of advice for princes on how to make sure that you do not finish last. None of us want to finish last. Machiavelli knew where this idea of acting nice originated from. The Christian story about this Jesus of Nazareth, this very nice man from Galilee who always treated people well. But in Machiavelli's view, Jesus' life was an outright disaster. The meek soul, in Machiavelli's understanding, the meek person was trampled upon. The meek person was humiliated. The meek person was disregarded and mocked. And so Jesus and those who follow his example, they are history's biggest losers. Yeah, it may look like that when Jesus died on the cross under the foot of the brutal Roman Empire. It might have looked like that. He's the world's biggest loser. Might look foolish. People were probably cracking jokes. Isn't this the one who said, "Blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth"? But then comes Easter Sunday, and history is made by this loser who died on the cross. The meek one, the one who says he's humble and lowly, meek and lowly, comes into Jerusalem as meekness riding on a donkey. The meek one is raised to life. And the resurrection says, history doesn't belong to the winners. History belongs to the loser, Jesus Christ. So how are we going to live? Are we going to live as though the powerful inherit the earth? Are we going to always be trying to get control? Are we going to take what we can out of life? Are we going to climb and climb, get what we can out of today? Are we going to dismiss the losers and try to be among the greaters? Jesus' life, Jesus' death, Jesus' resurrection, all testifies that victory does not lie with the power-hungry. In the end, the only ones who get anything are the meek, because the future belongs to the loser, belongs to Christ. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who give more than they receive. Blessed are those who take the time to explain and understand. Blessed are the gentle. Blessed are the frail. Blessed are those with no connections. Blessed are the dutiful. Blessed are the ones who are barely keeping it together. Blessed are the single parents. Blessed are the ill, the caregivers, the disabled. Blessed are the dementia sufferers, and the families who still visit. Blessed are they who include others even those they don't like. Blessed are they who see the good in people. Blessed are they who hold up others. Blessed are the meek, for the whole earth is theirs.